22.80. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling among the Sakyans at Kapilavatthu in Nigroda Spa. Then the Blessed One, having dismissed the monks for a particular reason, dressed in the morning and taking bowl and robe, entered Kapilavatthu for alms. And he had walked for alms in Kapilavatthu and had returned from the alms round. After his meal, he went to the great wood for the day's abiding. Having plunged into the great wood, he sat at the foot of a baluva sapling for the day's abiding. Then while the Blessed One was alone in seclusion, a reflection arose in his mind thus: the Sangha of monks has been dismissed by me. There are monks here who are newly ordained, not long gone forth, recently come to this Dhamma Vinaya. If they do not see me, there may take place in them some alteration or change. Just as when a young calf does not see its mother, there may take place in it some alteration or change. So too, there are monks here who are newly ordained, not long gone forth, recently come to this Dhamma Vinaya. If they do not see me, there may take place in them some alteration or change. Just as when young seedlings do not get water, there may take place in them some alteration or change. So too, there are monks here who are newly ordained, not long gone forth, recently come to this Dhamma Vinaya. If they do not see me, there may take place in them some alteration or change. Let me assist the Sangha of monks now, just as I have assisted it in the past. Stop here for a moment. So in this sutta, the Buddha was not happy with the monks, so he dismissed them and he went for alms round, and after his meal he went into the forest and spent the day alone. And then he reflected that maybe he should not leave the Sangha because there are a lot of new monks. Without a leader, the new monks are not steady yet. They may have a change of heart many times. If the abbot of a monastery is not around, sometimes the young monks they disrobe. So the Buddha reflected on this. Then he thought he should go back to them. Then Brahma Sahampati, having known with his own mind the reflection in the Blessed One's mind, just as quickly as a strong man might extend his drawn-in arm or draw in his extended arm, disappeared from the Brahma world and reappeared before the Blessed One. He arranged his upper robe over one shoulder, raised his joined hands in reverential salutation towards the Blessed One, and said to him, "So it is, Blessed One, so it is, Fortunate One. The Sangha of monks has been dismissed by the Blessed One. There are monks here who are newly ordained, not long gone forth, recently come to this Dhamma Vinaya. If they do not see the Blessed One, there may take place in them some alteration or change. Just as when a young calf does not see its mother, there may take place in it some alteration or change. So too, there are monks here who are newly ordained, not long gone forth, recently come to this Dhamma Vinaya. If they do not see the Blessed One, there may take place in them some alteration or change. Just as when young seedlings do not get water, there may take place in them some alteration or change. So too, there are monks here who are newly ordained, not long gone forth, recently come to this Dhamma Vinaya. If they do not see the Blessed One, there may take place in them some alteration or change. Venerable Sir, let the Blessed One take delight in the Sangha of monks. Let the Blessed One welcome the Sangha of monks. Let the Blessed One assist the Sangha of monks now just as he has assisted it in the past. The Blessed One consented by silence. Then Brahma Sahampati, having understood the Blessed One's consent, paid homage to the Blessed One, and keeping him on his right, he disappeared right there. Stop here for a moment. You see this Brahma Sahampati is quite helpful. Sometimes he feels that his presence is needed, he will come. So his Brahma heaven is so far away, but because of his great psychic power, he can just fly down here so fast, just as you can draw in your arm or extend your arm so fast. And the Arahant disciples of the Buddha, including the Buddha, are also like that. They have also such great psychic power, and they think they want to go to the Brahma heavens. Immediately, their body can fly there. So in this case, this Brahma-sampati is the one when the Buddha was enlightened and then decided not to teach the Dhamma. He came to beg the Buddha to teach the Dhamma and set the wheel rolling. So here he has come again. Actually, holy men like the Buddha, they are always watched after by the Devas. Then in the evening, the Blessed One emerged from seclusion and went to Nigroda's path. He sat down in the appointed seat and performed such a feat of psychic power that the monks would come to him alone and in pairs, in a timid manner. Then those monks approached the Blessed One, alone and in pairs, in a timid manner. Having approached, they paid homage to the Blessed One and sat down to one side. Let's stop here for a moment. So the Buddha used his psychic power to make the monks decide to come to him. So they came, sometimes they came alone, sometimes they came in pairs and all that. The Blessed One then said to them, "Monks, this is the lowest form of livelihood, that is gathering alms. In this world, this is a term of abuse. You alms gatherer, or alms beggar, you roam about with a begging bowl in your hand. And yet monks, clansmen intent on the good, take up that way of life for a valid reason. It is not because they have been driven to it by kings that they do so, nor because they have been driven to it by thieves, nor owing to debt, nor from fear, nor to earn a livelihood. But they do so with the thought, I am immersed in birth, aging and death, in sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure and despair. I am immersed in suffering, oppressed by suffering. Perhaps an ending to this entire mass of suffering might be discerned." Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is telling them, you monks, you are beggars, and this is the lowest form of livelihood. In the, sometimes we read the 10 contemplations that a monk has to make. The first contemplation is, I'm now come to the state of being an outcast. This outcast is, in India they have the caste system. So in the caste system they have 4 castes. The highest is supposed to be either the warriors, Khattiya, or the Brahmins, the priests caste. And then followed by the merchants, the Vesa, followed by the workers, Sudra. So these are the 4 castes. Now there are some so low they are considered out of this class. And monks are supposed to be like that. They have no caste. No caste. They are out of the caste. That's why they are outcast. So here the Buddha says a monk is livelihood, is the lowest form of livelihood. But the Buddha says still people take up monkhood for a good reason, and not because they are forced by kings or forced by death or because of fear or anything, but because they realize that there is suffering, there is birth, aging and dying, and all kinds of suffering. So to end all that suffering, that's why we wear the robe. It is in such a way, monks, that this clansman has gone forth. Yet he is covetous, inflamed by lust for sensual pleasures, with a mind full of ill will, with intentions corrupted by hate, muddle-minded, lacking clear comprehension, unconcentrated, scatterbrained, loose in his sense faculties, just as a brand from a funeral pyre, burning at both ends and smeared with excrement in the middle, cannot be used as timber either in the village or in the forest. In just such a way do I speak about this person. He has missed out on the enjoyments of a householder, yet he does not fulfill the goal of asceticism. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is saying that there are some monks, they have gone forth with a good intention, but after going forth, they are not able to practice correctly. They still have a lot of greed, a lot of lust, a lot of anger, muddle-minded, scatterbrained, and all that. So the Buddha said, It's neither here or there. They're just like the wood from the funeral pyre. It is burned at both ends, and in the middle you have all the excrement. So you cannot use it as timber in the village to put up a house, and you cannot even use it in the forest to to make a fire. So in other words, you're neither a good lay person or a good monk. There are amongst these three kinds of unwholesome thoughts: sensual thoughts of ill will, thoughts of harming. And where monks do these three unwholesome thoughts cease without remainder? For one who dwells with the mind well established in the four satipatthana, the four intense states of recollection, or for one who develops the signless concentration. This is reason enough, monks, to develop the signless concentration. When the signless concentration is developed and cultivated, monks, it is of great fruit and benefit. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is saying that the three kinds of unwholesome thoughts will cease without remainder when the mind is well established in the four satipatthana or in the signless concentration. Meaning to say, these two are quite equivalent. In the Satipatthana Samyutta that we will come to later, you will find that the Buddha says, if a person practices Satipatthana correctly, he must attain Samadhi, he must attain the jhanas, one-pointedness of mind. Also like remember Anuruddha, when they asked him what did he practice to get such great psychic power, he said the four Satipatthana. So Satipatthana is always equivalent to jhana. If you practice it correctly, it leads to jhana, it leads to samadhi. So here the Buddha says, all the signless concentration must be a very high state where there is no sign or no object. So it says this is a good reason to practice the signless concentration, because then all the unwholesome thoughts cease without remainder. There are amongst these two views, the view of existence or eternalism and the view of extermination or annihilationism. Therein amongst the learned noble disciple reflects thus: is there anything in the world that I could cling to without being blameworthy? He understands thus: there is nothing in the world that I could cling to without being blameworthy. For if I cling, it is only body that I would be clinging to, only feeling, perception, volition and consciousness that I would be clinging to. With that clinging of mind as condition, there would be being, bhava. With being as condition, birth, jati. With birth as condition, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure and despair would come to be. Such would be the origin of this whole mass of suffering. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha says, if we cling in the world, it means that we cling to this body and mind. And if we cling to the body and mind, then this being, I am, comes into existence. You have this concept or this perception that I am or I exist. And once you have the perception I exist, then you have birth. The moment you think you come into this world, that is your birth. And once you have birth, then you must have aging and sickening and dying and all kinds of suffering. What do you think, monks? Is body permanent or impermanent? Similarly, is feeling, perception, volition, consciousness permanent or impermanent? And they say impermanent, venerable sir. Is what is impermanent suffering or happiness? Suffering, venerable sir. Is what is impermanent suffering and subject to change, fit to be regarded thus? This is mine, this I am, this is myself. No, venerable sir. Seeing thus, he understands, and then he becomes liberated. You see this last part, the Buddha always stresses this point. Are the five aggregates permanent or impermanent? And they always say impermanent. And then what is impermanent? The source of suffering or happiness? And they say suffering. So what is impermanent, suffering and subject to change? Why do you continue to cling to it as this is mine, this I am, this is myself? So when they realize this, and they let go and become liberated. So this teaching the Buddha gave to these monks as they came to him, it is like a wake-up call, telling them then you have taken up the ropes already. Don't be careless, don't be negligent, don't be lazy. If you're lazy, you're neither a good layman or a good monk. You're neither here or there. Also asking them to develop the 4 satipatthana or the signless concentration. 22.81. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Kosambi in Gosita's park. Then in the morning, the Blessed One dressed, and taking bowl and robe, entered Kosambi for alms. When he had walked for alms in Kosambi, and had returned from the alms round, after his meal, he set his lodging in order himself. His kuti, he put in order, took his bowl and robe, and without informing his personal attendants, without taking leave of the Bhikkhu Sangha, he set out on tour alone, without a companion. Let's stop here for a moment. This sutta shows that says that the Buddha was at Kosambi, and at that time the Kosambi monks split because of a big quarrel. The Sangha split into 2 factions. So there was a schism of the Sangha. It was a very serious thing, and the monks were behaving very badly towards each other, shouting and sometimes fighting with each other and all that. So the Buddha tried to tell them to stop the quarreling. He tried so many times, they refused to listen to him. So he finally got fed up. So he put his swept his kuti, put everything in order, then took his bowl and robe and left without informing the monks. Then not long after the Blessed One had departed, a certain monk approached the Venerable Ananda and told him, "Friend Ananda, the Blessed One has set his lodging in order himself, taken his bowl and robe, and without informing his personal attendants, without taking leave of the Bhikkhu Sangha, he has set out on tour alone, without a companion." Venerable Ananda said, "Friend, whenever the Blessed One sets out like that, he wishes to dwell alone. On such an occasion, the Blessed One should not be followed by anyone." Then the Blessed One, wandering by stages, arrived at Parilayaka. There at Parilayaka, the Blessed One dwelt at the foot of an auspicious sal tree. Let's stop here for a moment. There's a story here that when the Buddha went to this place to live, that the elephant and the monkey came to attend to the Buddha. They served the Buddha and all that. Don't know whether it's true or not, just a story. Then a number of monks approached the Venerable Ananda and exchanged greetings with him. And when they had concluded their greetings and cordial talk, they sat down to one side and said to the Venerable Ananda, "Friend Ananda, it has been a long time since we heard a Dhamma talk in the presence of the Blessed One. We should like to hear such a talk, friend Ananda." Stop here for a moment. These monks, they're supposed to be 500 monks who had just arrived after the Vasa. They wanted to see the Buddha, and they found that he was not around. So they said they want to hear a Dhamma talk from the Buddha, and told Venerable Ananda, probably wanted Venerable Ananda to bring them to see the Buddha. Then the Venerable Ananda, together with those monks, approached the Blessed One at Parilayaka at the foot of the auspicious sal tree. Having approached, they paid homage to the Blessed One and sat down to one side. The Blessed One then instructed, exhorted, inspired, and gladdened those monks with a Dhamma talk. On that occasion, a reflection arose in the mind of a certain monk thus: "How should one know? How should one see for the immediate destruction of the asava to occur?" Stop here for a moment. So this monk was thinking, how can one know and see so that one can immediately become liberated, attain arahanthood, and destroy the asavas. The Blessed One, having known with his own mind the reflection in that monk's mind, addressed the monks thus: "Monks, this Dhamma has been taught by me discriminately. The 4 satipatthanas have been taught by me discriminately. The 4 right efforts, the 4 bases of psychic power, iddhipada, the 5 spiritual faculties, indriya, the 5 powers, bala, the 7 factors of enlightenment, bojjhanga, the noble eightfold path, arya atangika magga, has been taught by me discriminately. Monks, in regard to the Dhamma that has been taught by me discriminately, a reflection arose in the mind of a certain monk thus: How should one know? How should one see for the immediate destruction of the asavas to occur? And how, monks, should one know? How should one see for the immediate destruction of the asavas to occur? I stop here for a moment. Just now the Buddha mentioned all these practices, the 4 satipatthana, the 4 right efforts, iddhipada, the 4, samma vayama, the 4 right efforts, and then the 4 iddhipada, the 5 indriya, the 5 bala, the 7 bojjhanga, the Arya Atangika Magga, all these, if you add them up, these 4 and 4 and 4 and 5 and 5 and 7 and 8, they add to 37. They're called the 37 Bodhipakya Dhammas. And this is the core of the Buddha's teachings, because if you practice these things, they will lead to enlightenment. So the Buddha says that he has taught these things, and yet a certain monk is asking how to attain enlightenment. Then the Buddha continued. And how, monks, should one know, how should one see for the immediate destruction of the asavas to occur? Here, monks, the unlearned, ordinary person who does not see noble ones and is unskilled and untrained in their Dhamma, who does not see superior persons and is unskilled and untrained in their Dhamma, regards body as self. That regarding, monks, is a volition, sankhara. That volition, what is its source, what is its origin, from what is it produced, from what is it born? When the unlearned ordinary person is contacted by a feeling born of ignorance contact, craving arises, hence that volition is born. Thus, monks, that volition is impermanent, conditioned, dependently arisen. That craving is impermanent, conditioned, dependently arisen. That feeling is impermanent, conditioned, dependently arisen. That contact is impermanent, conditioned, dependently arisen. That ignorance is impermanent, conditioned, dependently arisen. When one knows and sees thus, monks, the immediate destruction of the asavas occurs. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha says, an ordinary worldling, he regards the body as the self, and that is a volition. And then the Buddha says, when feeling arises from contact, craving arises. It is a pleasant feeling. There's a tendency to crave for pleasant feelings. So that is how volition is born. But that volition is impermanent. And that volition comes from craving. Craving is also impermanent. The craving comes from feeling. The feeling also is impermanent. The feeling comes from contact, which again is impermanent. And the contact comes from ignorance. It's also impermanent. And if you understand this chain of dependent origination, then you will immediately attain liberation. Then Buddha continued. He may not regard body as self, but he regards self as possessing body. Again, that regarding is a volition, and all the rest above is repeated. When one knows and sees thus, monks, the immediate destruction of the asavas occurs. Or he may not regard body as self, or self as possessing body, but he regards body as in self, or he regards self as in body. And similarly, that craving and all that leads to, if he understands the chain of dependent origination, then he attains destruction of the asavas. Or he may not regard body as self, or self as in consciousness, etc. But he holds such a view. That which is the self in the world, having passed away, that I shall be permanent, stable, eternal, not subject to change. That eternalist view is a volition. And similarly, volition comes from all the conditions. Comes from craving, and craving comes from feeling, etc. If he understands all that chain, then he can also become immediately enlightened. Or he may regard body as self, or etc., or hold such an eternalist view. But he holds the annihilationist view, which is were I not then, it would not now be mine. I shall not be, to me it shall not be. That means after death, then there's nothing anymore. Then even then, if he understands that is a volition, and then that chain of volitions that leads to suffering, if you understand the whole chain, then he becomes enlightened. But he does not regard all that above, but he is perplexed, doubtful, indecisive in regard to the true Dhamma. That perplexity, doubtfulness, indecisiveness in regard to the true Dhamma is a volition. That volition, what is its source, its origin? When the unlearned ordinary person is contacted by a feeling born of ignorance contact, craving arises, hence that volition is born. So that volition monks is impermanent condition, dependently arisen. That craving is impermanent, that feelings is impermanent, contact is impermanent, ignorance is impermanent, etc. When one knows and sees thus monks, the immediate destruction of the asavas occurs. That's the end of the sutta. So here the Buddha has given this quite a long Dhamma talk to these monks who came to see him. Basically, is a bit similar, the pattern like the others. But here it incorporates the teachings on the 5 aggregates plus the teachings on dependent origination, paticca samuppada. So I stop here for tonight. Anything to discuss? You notice these suttas are all quite heavy going, not like the first book. Yeah. It seems to be a very simple compared to some of the longer ones, yeah.
And just but they say that the 5 ecstatic monks have been into a state of jhana. Are they, when they are listening to the Dhamma talk, are they in jhana?
No. They cannot be in jhana when they are listening to the Dhamma talk. But in the suttas it is mentioned, if a monk attains the jhanas, the 5 hindrances are permanently eliminated. Are eliminated, although the roots have not been pulled out, but they are eliminated, so that any time the mind is very clear.
How cultivate spiritual maturity in and my question is that those aesthetic practices used by the followers and monks fasten the process
This maturing on the spiritual path is a natural process for everybody. And when you are more mature, then you make greater effort. When you are not mature, even though the Buddha is around, you will still not be interested to go and listen to him. So this process of maturing on the spiritual path is a very natural process. So it's if you make the effort it's only because it's natural that you do it. For example, like our Siddhartha Gautama, because he had already probably attained Sakadagamin in his previous life, then even he had such a good family, such a wealthy and happy life, still he gave up and went forth, renounced everything to be a homeless beggar and suffer so much. So if your time is not up, you can't force yourself to do it. There's no such thing as forcing yourself.
But the aesthetic practices are followed by the followers monks. What they are doing is trying to get the revulsions towards the aggregate, and then they become dispassionate and all this so that they get enlightenment.
You see, the Dhamma is leading us in that way to understand the nature of the 5 aggregates, or the nature of dependent origination of suffering and all that. And if we understand that, then we practice according to the advice of the Buddha to become enlightened. So there are some people who prefer to go to the forest. On the other hand, there are some people who can practice even without becoming a monk. Like during the Buddha's time, there were a few laymen. They still remain as laymen, but they practiced until they became anagamins. That means they had attained at least the 4 jhanas. But when you look into the description of about them, they, even though they stay in the house, they behave like a monk in the sense that they don't associate with people. They've given up their business. They let their wives look after their business, and then they let go of everything. Even one of them even called the 4 wives and told the wives that I intended to practice the spiritual path. If any of you wants to get married to another man, just let me know, I will give you away. And the first wife said, oh yeah, I want to get married to such and such a man. So he immediately called for that man and gave the wife away. So he, even though he does not go and stay in a cave, but to him his room is like a cave. He stays in that room and practice without going out. Practice day and night until he attains the jhanas and becomes an anagamin. So whether a person becomes a monk or a layman is up to that person. And also, even after becoming a monk, not all monks will become forest dwellers. Not all monks will beg for their food. So it depends on the person. All people are all different.
Somebody that if they reach the level become an arahant, they must don the robe or else they will die the next day.
Firstly, there are cases of lay people like Yasa in the Vinaya books. Yasa is one man who comes from a very rich family, and the Buddha made him come out of the house in the night and go to the forest where the Buddha was. And the Buddha spoke the Dhamma to him and he attained stream entry. The next morning the father went looking for him and then came to where the Buddha was. And the Buddha taught the same Dhamma to the father. The father also attained stream entry. But Yasa, hearing the same Dhamma the second time, attained arahanthood as a layman. But after attaining arahanthood, he does not go back to the house. That old Yasa has died. There is no more of the Yasa in him. He has died. You can see Dhamma cannot fold up your legs like that. So a lay person can become an arahant, but after becoming an arahant, he is totally a different person already. He cannot go back to the home. And this is pure speculation that if he does not renounce, he will die within one day. There's no such thing mentioned in the Sutta or the Vinaya. It's just that he will not go back home, and it's impossible for a person once they become enlightened. That old lay person has died. It's no more that lay person, so he cannot go back to the home. He will either become a monk or an ascetic. He will go to the forest. I don't know whether that was a true story, but I don't know whether because of that people say that if a lay person does not, after becoming an arahant, does not ordain, he will die. But in this case, he did not die because he did not ordain. He died because he got caught by a cow. But in the case of this man, Bahya Daruchirya, I think he was not an arahant. I think he may have attained anagamin or something. Not sure. This in the monk's discipline, the Buddha at first said that the monk should eat one meal a day. Actually, initially he did not specify how many meals, and then the monks could eat as many times as they wanted and could go on alms round as many times as they wanted a day. But later, because more monks came in, and many of them were careless, then the Buddha started to make more and more precepts. And then, so finally the Buddha said the monks should eat 1 meal a day. But there were some monks who were not happy. They complained to the Buddha, and then the Buddha said, okay, you can only go on alms round once a day. And after coming back from alms round, you take your main meal. But if you want, you can leave some food to eat later. But as long as it's not past noon. In Malaysia, noon is about 1 p.m. So, in other words, the Buddha is saying we can eat 2 meals, breakfast and lunch, which is generally the standard. So, the Buddha said also that if we practice, that we should know moderation in eating, not eat too much. So, we should, if possible, we should try to everybody eat at the same time, breakfast and eat lunch at the same time, because it's not nice, doesn't look nice if somebody wants to eat at his own sweet time, because it's a monastery, it's not a household, it's a monastery, it's a disciplined place, and everybody trains himself in the spiritual discipline. So there are certain allowables that are allowed after noon, like herbs, dark chocolate, olive, this ginger, tea, coffee, and all that, and even cheese in the Thai tradition. But then you should know that these things are generally for us, like our monastery, disciplined monasteries, we don't simply buy some of these things as and when we like. We generally depend on donations. So if people give us dark chocolate, we eat dark chocolate. If people give us prunes, we eat prunes. And generally we don't buy these things unless we feel it's really necessary. So you have to bear this in mind when we take out certain things supposed to last for some time. Don't gobble them up in one day like that. Also have to think that it's meant for everybody in the monastery, and don't take too much. Other people don't have enough. So that is practicing moderation. Because you have to understand, according to the Buddha's teachings, that our mind is the forerunner of all states. Our mind is the forerunner of all states. If your mind is trained, disciplined, then your feelings and all that come according to your mind. In other words, if you think you're constantly hungry, it's because your mind thinks so. If your mind is weak and you think you cannot stand, and so it follows that you will feel more hungry than other people, because just like when you want to strive hard, person who is more disciplined, because he makes a determination, then he's able to do it. But if a person just starts with the mind half-hearted, then when a little bit of obstacles come, you give up already. So always remember that we have to be very clear that the mind determines the world we live in, determines the conditions. For example, if a person is always craving for example, a person is always craving for drugs, he's a drug addict. It's very natural that he always feels hungry, he's always craving for that, hungry for that drug. So the moment he dies, he will be reborn as a hungry ghost, because his mind has conditioned. I personally know of 1 or 2 persons, even now they have not died. They are already behaving a bit like a hungry ghost, because they were drug addicts before. When they eat, they gorge themselves as much as they can. They eat 2 or 3 persons share, they can eat as much as 2 or 3 persons. After 5 or 10 minutes, they vomit out everything. And then after that, of course, they feel hungry again. After 2 hours or so, 3 hours, they'll eat like a hungry ghost. Eat 2 or 3 persons amount. Then 10 minutes later, they vomit out everything again. So it already shows they are already going to be like that. Going to be a hungry ghost already. So you have to be very clear that we have to train our mind to be strong. If you don't train your mind to be strong, then you will never be strong because you never make the determination. That's why the volition, always the Buddha mentioned volition is very important. Your determination is your volition. Yeah, when Heng. Cannot. If in this monastery, all lay people are supposed to keep the 8 precepts. If you keep the 8 precepts, you're not allowed to eat ordinary food after one. Or in the house. In the house, it depends whether you are keeping 8 precepts or not. If you are keeping 8 precepts, you are not allowed to eat after one. Huh? If you are keeping the 8 precepts, you cannot say, I'm keeping 8 precepts, 2 meals is allowed, so I take breakfast and dinner. No. 8 precepts means you only eat in the morning, after the sun comes up, that means after 7 a.m. and up to the sun, when the sun is the highest, 1 o'clock or 1 something. Yeah. Always remember, like that day we read in the suttas, unless you become an Arya, you take monastery food also is on credit card. Can we transfer Marin?